Okay, so today we're going to review pronoun antecedent agreement. You can follow along with your handout, stopping to complete the handout as the screencast continues. So just a quick review of the basic. Pronouns help us to avoid being overly repetitive, so we wouldn't say John went to the store but John forgot to buy milk. Instead, we'd use a pronoun and we would say John went to the store but he forgot to buy milk. So basically a pronoun replaces the noun but must keep the meaning the same. So an antecedent is that word for the original noun. John went to the store but he forgot to buy eggs. Well, John is the antecedent. It's the original noun that our pronoun he has replaced. Just remember, we can't have a pronoun without an antecedent, and we want to avoid unclear pronouns. So we wouldn't want to say, when Alexander drove the car through the garage door, he badly damaged it, because the pronoun it has two potential antecedents, Alexander and garage door. So avoid pronouns without antecedents and unclear pronoun usage. So let's move into pronoun antecedent agreement. You can remember the word antecedent based on its Latin roots and prefixes, ante meaning before and sed meaning go, so the antecedent goes before the pronoun. And there's three basic ideas to keep in mind when considering pronoun antecedent agreement. The first is person. You need to stick in first, second, or third. The second is number, whether it's singular or plural. And the third is gender, staying with male, female, or neutral pronouns. Let's take a look at a couple cases. The first rule is staying consistent with person. So it would be incorrect to say when a student is ill, you have to make up the missed assignments because we switched from third to second person. We would need to stick to third person. When a student is ill, he or she has to make up the missed assignment. So essentially do not shift between first and second person and third person in your writing. You can take a moment to write the corrected answer down in your handout. The next example of pronoun antecedent agreement is number. We have to stay consistent with number. So when we would say, when my cousin comes over, they don't want to do anything but watch TV, we've used an incorrect pronoun because cousin is singular, whereas they is a plural pronoun. We could either say, when my cousin comes over, she doesn't want to do anything but watch TV. Or we could say, when my cousin comes over, he doesn't want to do anything but watch TV. Either case is fine because both pronoun antecedent are singular, so they match. Go ahead and take a minute to write the corrected sentence down on your handout. The next case is gender. We have to be sure that we've stuck with a consistent gender between our pronoun and antecedent, whether that's masculine, feminine, or neutral. So, for example, the girls took their car to get her brake fixed. Car is a neutral antecedent, so we wouldn't use a gender-specific pronoun such as her. Instead, we'd say the girls took their car to get its brake fixed because car is neutral and so is its. So those are the basics. That's when it's pretty easy, and we're probably doing that correctly in our writing. However, there are some difficult cases: collective nouns, indefinite pronouns, coordinating conjunctions, who and whom, and pronoun case. And these are the tricky cases when we're probably making mistakes in our writing. So we want to go through and make sure we have a clear understanding of each of those 5 tricky cases. Let's start with collective nouns. Remember, a collective noun is a noun that represents a group or multiple people, but the collective noun always is singular. So for example, the class, the Bahamas, the audience, each of those is a collective noun as it refers to multiple parts, but in and of itself is singular. For example, one class, many students. So it'd be incorrect to say the Bahamas does not have a firm plan for their tourism season because it's one nation, the Bahamas. Although it's made up of many islands, it's still a singular antecedent. So instead, we'd need to say the Bahamas does not have a firm plan for its tourism season. Now there's an exception to the rule, and that is when you are referring to multiple parts of the collective noun. So for example, the audience clapped their hands. Now we're going to use the plural pronoun their because we're referring to multiple parts of the audience, hands. So the audience is singular, but there are multiple hands. So just to practice this quick exception, take a look at the 3 examples below and determine whether there are any necessary corrections to be made. So for question number 1, notice that the collective noun team here has a pronoun there. Because team is a collective noun, our instinct should tell us to use the singular pronoun, but we have to watch out and make sure that there's not multiple parts of the collective noun being referred to. In this case, coach is singular, So we would in fact change the pronoun there to the singular pronoun. So it should read, every afternoon the baseball team follows its coach because it's just one coach. Whereas in number 2, we have the same team, a singular collective noun. However, we need to say their air-conditioned homes because there are multiple homes being referred to. Number 3, the jury agrees that the state prosecutors did not provide enough evidence for its verdict, so it's not guilty. The antecedent is jury, the pronoun is its, and because we're only referring to a singular verdict, we would keep our pronoun singular to match our singular collective noun jury. Alright, our second tricky situation is indefinite pronouns as antecedents. So remember, indefinite pronouns are indefinite because we're not sure exactly whom they're referring to. Some examples of singular indefinite pronouns are each, either, neither, one, no one, nobody, nothing, anyone, anything, anybody, someone, somebody, something, everyone, everybody, and everything. So as you can see in our example, each is a singular indefinite pronoun, so we use a singular pronoun referent, his or her, to replace it. We don't say their, even though in everyday conversation we probably would use their. But in correct formal grammar, such as when we're writing, we need to make sure to use his or her. So take a moment, write your own example of a sentence that uses an indefinite pronoun along with the pronoun referent. Alright, there are a variety of correct answers, but perhaps you've written something like, anybody who would like to should pick up his or her homework assignment after class. Or, somebody left his or her umbrella behind. Those are some examples of singular indefinite pronouns and singular pronoun reference. There are also plural indefinite pronouns such as several, few, both, and many. These plural indefinite pronouns take plural pronoun reference, such as both do a good job in their office. Because both is plural, our pronoun referent there is also plural. So take a minute and write your own sentence with a plural pronoun antecedent and referent. Again, there are many correct answers, but perhaps you said something like, several of the students have turned in their essay late. We'd use the plural pronoun referent there because several is plural. There are some indefinite pronouns that can be either singular or plural depending on the prepositional phrase they modify. For example, some, any, none, all, or most. So the trick here is when the object of the preposition is uncountable, meaning you couldn't count it, it does not have its own units of measure, you use a singular referent pronoun. So for example, some can go both ways, so we have to figure out it's modifying sugar. I cannot count sugar. Sugar on its own does not have a unit of measure. I can't say 1 sugar, 2 sugar, 3 sugar. Because it's uncountable, I use a singular pronoun referent, its. Some of the sugar fell out of its bag. If I wanted to make it plural, I would have to find some sort of unit of measure to make it countable. So I could say, some of the grams of sugar fell out of their bag, or some of the pounds of sugar fell out of their bag. In that case, I've found a countable unit of measure, so I can make it plural. So that's our second example. The pronoun reference, some, any, none, all, and most can become plural when they are countable. So, some of the marbles fell out of their bag. Because marbles are a countable unit of measure, I can count 1 marble, 2 marble, 3 marbles. I would use the plural pronoun referent there. So that's just a little bit tricky. Why don't you try writing a sentence where you're using either a countable or non-countable indefinite pronoun and the appropriate corresponding pronoun referent. So there are many examples, but perhaps you wrote many of or most of the raindrops. In that case, raindrops are countable. I can count 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drops. So maybe I said most of the raindrops landed in their bucket. In that case, I'm going to use the plural referent there. So hopefully that concept is making sense too. It's kind of a tricky one. All right. The next tricky situation is coordinating conjunctions. Remember, coordinating conjunctions are fanboys, and they can either separate or combine the separate subjects. So, and is a coordinating conjunction that makes 2 singular subjects plural, such as Bert and Ernie kidnapped their neighbor Mr. Rogers, and or nor keep separate subjects separate. If there are 2 separate subjects, you always agree with the subject that came last. So for example, either Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny did his taxes. So or separates, I'm going to agree with the second antecedent, Easter Bunny, and so here I'm going to say his taxes. Neither Julia Roberts nor Demi Moore knows her own telephone number. I'm going to agree with the second one. Neither the teacher nor the students, in this case I have a singular antecedent and a plural antecedent. But because students is the antecedent closest to my pronoun there, I'm going to use the plural pronoun there to match with the plural antecedent students. The third tricky situation is gender discrimination in pronoun. You want to make sure that the pronoun is inclusive of both genders when possible. So every student needs to get his act together. It's grammatically correct, but it's reasonable to assume that there might be female students as well, so you might want to make this pronoun inclusive and say every student needs to get his or her act together, or just simply all students need to get their acts together is a simpler way to say that. Okay, take a moment and jot down these pronoun cases in your handout. You'll simply need to know the distinction between a subject pronoun, which does the action of the sentence, or the object pronoun, which receives the action of the sentence. And it would be a good idea just to jot down these lists of subject pronouns and object pronouns so you have the example in your handout. So a sentence that uses an object pronoun or a subject pronoun is he needs some chocolate. You can see he is the subject of the sentence. Versus will somebody get him some chocolate? Him is receiving the action of getting the chocolate, so there would use an object pronoun. Pretty obvious in and of themselves, but there are some tricky situations where we tend to mix these up. One example is comparisons. You always use subject pronouns when you're comparing. A comparison sentence compares two or more people or things, and it uses a comparison phrase such as more than, less than, or as much as. So technically you're supposed to use two subject pronouns, so you would actually say, she likes Halloween candy more than they, or I am faster than he. This sounds incorrect, and in everyday language we'd probably say them or him, but if you think through it, it actually makes sense to use the subject pronoun, because all you need to do is complete the sentence to figure it out. She likes Halloween candy more than they do. All we've done is chopped off the do, and we've been left with they, but for some reason in conversational language we tend to default to using them, when in fact we should stick with using the subject pronoun they. The same is true here. I am faster than he is. If I drop off the verb is, I'm stuck with he. I should not change that to object pronoun. Another situation is when we use and. We need to be sure when using and that we use the correct subject or object pronoun, and a trick is simply to cross out anything standing in the way of that confusion. So my dad drove my sister and, is it I or me? We'll simply cross out my sister and I am left with the correct answer. My dad drove me. Here I'm receiving the action, so I need the object pronoun. Jose and blank will go to the store. Should it be he or him? We'll just cross out Jose and I would say he will go to the store, the subject pronoun. I would never say him will go to the store. So that's a handy trick when you have and, just cross out the thing that's making it confusing. And the third situation is who and whom. Who is a subject, think of it like he. Whom is an object, think of it like him. So for example, who or whom are you trying to call? I am trying to call him. So I would say, whom are you trying to call? It's the object pronoun that receives the action, not does the action. Versus who or whom solved the mystery, well, he solved it. So I'm going to use the subject pronoun who in that sentence. So take a moment, pause this if you haven't completed it yet, complete the exercise on the back, use this page to check your answers, and please let me know if you have any questions.